we have the licensees who have a contract with government, and then we have what we call the major subcontractors who have been making presentations here on day one. So the tier one contractors are those who are capable of picking up large scopes of work that are multidimensional and also have big financial muscle and technical capacity to execute multidimensional scopes of work. That is tier one, in simple terms. Now, tier two are the companies that are subcontracted by the tier ones to do some of the scopes of work under those large scopes. Now, one would say some people have defined tier one as the companies that have a direct contract with the licensee. But that is not exactly correct, because my company, True North, has a contract with Total. But we're not tier one, because we only do manpower services. If you are not executing multidimensional scopes of work that require a lot of technical and financial capacity, you probably wouldn't qualify. There are many law firms who have contracts with Total and Sinok. They are not categorized as tier one. So we are 2 and 3, depending on the scopes of work we are doing. Now, this conversation is about how do we make sure that the one who got the contract from the one who got the contract and the one who got the contract also retains value. Because there's always a risk that by the time the contract or the work reaches tier 3, meaning you got the contract from the subcontractor of the contractor, the value could have gone. Or your scope of work could be too small for you to get sustainable value. Or, as some people have used the phrase, the juice could have been squeezed out of the fruit. So this is what this conversation is about. These companies face risks, but also have opportunities they face, and that's what the conversation is going to be about. Now, we are going to think and talk about value creation, or destruction for that matter, in the context of financial value, in the context of technical capacity, in the context of technology transfer, in the context of growth, from growing from a small company, tier 3, to tier 2, to tier 1, or growing even your capacity to supply services outside the border, since the project traverses borders. So that is the context in which we are going to think about value. We are going to think about value in terms of sustainability. How do tier 2 and 3 companies sustain the operations over the long term? Those are the conversations we are going to be talking about. And very importantly, how do they manage their technical, their legal, their human resource, their operational risks? That is going to be the context of this conversation. And to lead us in this conversation, I have a very eminent panel of people who I'm going to invite one by one. The first one is Mr. Shivan Hatton, who traveled all the way from Johannesburg. Please come up. Shivan is the head of MASH Specialty for Africa, South Africa, and is responsible for MASH's risk advisory. Just take a seat. Placement and claim services for all specialty clients in Africa, as well as international clients with a specialty risk in Africa. He joined MASH in 2013, and he has been involved a lot in client engagement. So, please join me in welcoming Shivan. The second discussant is a very familiar name. I will apologize for those who will be bored, but he's Mr. Jeff Baitwa. Jeff is one of the old boys. I won't say big boys. He only became a big boy recently with the new contract they have. But he's one of the old boys in the oil industry. Jeff, please come up. He's the current... No, let me start with the correct title. I don't know who wrote this. But Jeff founded Three Ways Shipping Services in 1996, a firm which specializes in freight services between Uganda and the rest of the world. He's currently presiding over the restructuring and repositioning of Bro Group in the market. and is setting up a new governance structure that will actually look after how all its subsidiaries and partners will look. I think when they announced companies that are now, is it tier 1 or tier 2? Subcontractors for logistics, 3 ways was one of those that were announced. I'm happy to also say that Jeff is the current treasurer of the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum. Put your hands together for Jeff. The third panelist is Miss Margaret Obo. Miss Margaret of the midstream activities in the Petroleum and Mining Division of URA. She handles compliance activities of companies in the upstream oil and gas sector, and she has done that for a period of 10 years. So if you have any questions on tax, please prepare them while Margaret comes up. Please give a round of applause for Margaret. My next panelist is Mr. Marvin Ndaula. Marvin is a strategy and pricing expert with 10 years working experience in international companies, banking services, and construction industry. He's currently the head of commercial strategy and performance at Hima Cement, a subsidiary of Lafarge Holcim. Please put your hands together for Marvin. The next panelist is also a very familiar name, Karuhanga, but the smaller one. So Elson, please come up. Elson doesn't require a lot of litigation. He's one of the most visible lawyers in Uganda and one of the very active ones in the oil and gas sector. But to be a little bit more formal, I'll say that he works in the litigation and energy law department of Kampala Associated Advocates. I'm not sure if Matthew is here. So my final panelist is Matthew Chaligonza. He's the head of national content at Sinok Uganda Limited. He has over 16 years experience in the sector. And I want to introduce the rest of the qualifications. Please you put your hands together for Matthew. All these panels have very, very amazing qualifications. If you read here, you would take a whole day. I was just about to start mentioning Matthews. I see Six Sigma and other things, which is like a belt in Kung Fu. But I chose to skip the qualifications. So very welcome, my panelists. The way we are going to run this is we are going to start with getting an overview of some of the typical risks that are involved in the oil and gas sector. And because we are talking about value creation and retention, you can never think of a better person to talk about risks and how they can be mitigated than an insurer. So we are going to start with a presentation from Shivan, from MASH, and then after we'll have another presentation from Marvin of HIMA. Once those two are done, we'll open up a panel conversation on the subject that I introduced. So whoever is in the controls, kindly help us put up the MASH presentation as I invite Shivan to. There's a pointer here. Oh, he's got his own pointer. That's a good way of managing risk. You can come up and make the presentation. Please put your hands together for Shivan. Thank you.
Thanks, Abdul. I'm forever paranoid about technology not working, so I've got my laptop, my notes, everything is risk mitigation plans that I've got in place. So I'll take a very quick presentation for you. Firstly, thank you for inviting us to discuss risks and insurance topics today. There might be some duplication with some of the other content during this convention, but I'll focus on kind of 4 key elements. Contractual arrangements and how that can bring risk to various parties in a contract. How risk is allocated in contracts. How insurance can help to support mitigate those risks. And finally, some key pillars of adding value through the risk landscape. Is the presentation back up? Let's just... Perfect, thank you. Just as some underlying context, it's useful to understand that there are several stakeholders within an insurance transaction, and all of these stakeholders need to come together to ensure an adequate risk transfer solution on behalf of the insured. So there are financiers and bankers who are ultimately financing the insured. There'll be insurers and reinsurers providing financial security in the event of a loss, loss adjusters, warranty surveyors and risk engineers providing technical input, brokers and risk advisors supporting the insured through the process. So there's a number of different parties, and they all need to come together at the end of the day. And you know, what is a contract, and what does that look like? So contract is a legally binding agreement. I think everyone will know that here, between the parties privy to the contract, and could be the owner, could be the contractor, could be subcontractors, tier 1, 2, 3, whatever it may be. And it formally documents the technical scope, the responsibilities of various parties, the compensation arrangements, and a number of different things. But also, it formally records the risk allocation between contracting parties, typically through indemnity clauses. And then insurance clauses are also included in there in a way to enforce certain mandatory coverages to be placed between the contracting parties. And there'll be many different types of contracting philosophies that dictate the risk allocation and the insurance requirements, and that will depend from time to time and the contracting environment that's currently in place. Just as a very kind of typical contractual structure that we see, you know, there's several links in there, and this diagram will, once it's finished, will show a complex set of interactions, and the risk comes in at various elements of these contracts. There'll be a supply agreement as well as a purchase agreement, as with any transaction. There may be a lender's agreement, and lenders are keen to ensure that there's adequate insurance in place to protect their financing. Contractors' agreements across various levels of tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 contractors, and this extends to various subcontractors in very different ways. So there's risk in lots of different places wherever there's a contractual obligation. And things can go wrong, right? So if we don't get it right, a lack of execution could lead to delays, poor interaction leading to additional risk being carried between various parties, or worse, gaps in terms of where risk is currently in place and not being protected in the right way. And that's where insurance policies come in. And in the worst case, you know, there's no adequate protection for those risks that they have. So, you know, how do we get risk transferred? So many of the risks that we'll see tend to be insurable through project insurances, property insurance, delay in startup, marine risk, third-party liability, and so on and so forth. And alongside the owner's risk, there's also a contractor risk. And when we talk about contractor, that could be any different level of contractors that we're talking about. And some of it will be allocated to the owner, some of it to contractors. But what we'd ideally like to do is a single kind of overarching level of insurance that covers the entirety of the risk that's in place. But realistically and typically, you don't get the entirety covered in one place. There's always an element of risk that's either uninsurable, in which case everyone needs to know what it is, or there's responsibility outside of the main policy that will need to be insured by various contractors and so on. And broadly speaking, you can, I don't know whether that's very eligible from where you're sitting, but broadly speaking, we can categorize that into various two sectors. The owner's responsibility across various different insurance policies, and the contractor's responsibility as well. And then once the project is operational, then the contractor is released from their liability, and the owner will be responsible going forward. So what does a typical insurance transaction then look like? If we know that what we've showed here is the kind of the risk landscape that we have, then the insured on the far left of the screen can access capital and security to help protect them through the insurance industry. And they'll access that insurer locally in the middle of this diagram through a retail broker But if there's complexity, or if there's size and scale involved, and there's not enough capacity and capital to insure and adequately protect a risk, then there may often be reinsurance purchased through in international markets where there may be capital through using a wholesale broker to play a part. So that's the whole chain there. Left to right is the insurance transaction, and in the event of a loss, assuming there's adequate protection, then the claim goes right to left on the screen, from the markets through back to the insured. And whether this is at a owner level, at a contractor level, this stands true for whatever it may be, and across all the insurance policies that we kind of referred to on the previous slide. So where does value come into all of this? At every single chain, there's value to be created, and whether that's capacity generation of helping the insurers in the middle to take more risk and create more capital for them, or in various different ways. And so in our view, there's more than one way of just generating value. There are many, but I've highlighted kind of 3 areas that we think really work to where we stand, and from an insurance standpoint that we can bring to various clients all over the world. Risk engineering is the first one. We have a global footprint as a client, as an entity, and our scale of clients means that we visit hundreds and different sites every year and see a huge variety of risk. This allows us to understand kind of what's on the forefront of the risk landscape that every client faces day to day, and how various industries put measures in place to minimize that risk. So this global experience allows us to bring those solutions from across the world to our clients wherever they are across the world as well. So a learning in North America can then be implemented elsewhere in Africa, for example. Then the second piece, and I think this is a critical one from our standpoint, it's loss mitigation. We see losses of all sorts and types from around the world, and losses happen. That's why insurance is in place, so that you can protect against those losses. But what's important for us is to learn from those losses, understand the trends, and help support our clients from around the world to understand the loss trends, see where they're coming from and the different scenarios, and really help our clients around the world to learn from those losses so that they don't have to have the same experiences. And I guess the last one is training and skills development. Again, it kind of cuts through all of these things that we're talking about. And all of this kind of global experience allows us to have a significant amount of kind of knowledge built within our business and within our industry. And I think fundamental pillar for us in our value proposition and our industry's value proposition is to drive skills transfer, thought leadership, and enable skills growth and development. And lastly, as we talk about that, part of that skills transfer is our continued commitment to developing the skills and team in our own operations in Uganda. It's a key pillar for us, and that's also a key aspect of delivering value. With that, Abdul, I'll hopefully set the scene for you. I will for the panel. I won't be around for the panel, unfortunately, but I'll hand back over to you for further discussion. Thank you.
Round of applause for Shivan. I forgot to relay Shivan's apologies. He's under the weather and was literally dragged here to make the presentation, so he will not be able to stay. But I'm sure if you have any difficult questions, you can push them to me. I'll try and figure out how to relay them to him. Oh, you thought I was going to say I would answer them here? No, I wouldn't. Let me invite Marvin from HIMA, so that he makes the presentation. Once we're done with the presentations, we will go into the panel discussion. Marvin. Yeah, the presentation they're going to put it up.
Thank you, Abu. Good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen. And I would like to, of course, begin by thanking the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, and also the Ministry of Energy, and mineral development for organizing and putting together this very informative and very wonderful convention. I bring greetings from HIMA Cement, and of course I would like to begin by mentioning that the three areas that I'm going to be focusing on, or that my presentation is going to be focusing on, are around how we can enhance value retention through the tiers 2 and 3. I'm going to take us through the journey of HIMA Cement and what products and services we have come up with to ensure that we foster this value retention. All right, so all right, as I get my presentation, I will talk through it. So as HIMA Cement, we embarked on this journey about 3 or 4 years ago, and we have had an able team that has been handling any queries and any engagements on oil and gas, and we've been meeting different parties, different contractors. All right, thank you. And our key focus has been on how we can enhance or add value, just like I mentioned, to the tier 2, tier 3, and tier 1. I would like to begin, obviously, by this slide, a very precious slide for us as HIMA Cement, because we are engaged in a geocycle, one of a kind, and the only cement manufacturing and selling company that actually has this wing. And this geocycle is basically around us adding value on waste management. HIMA Cement is very keen on health and safety, control of CO2 emissions, but majorly waste management. And so currently what we do is we basically have what we call the biomass, the coffee husks, the groundnut husks, the rice husks that we source from the local community, and then we use this as fuel. Now, in regards to what value we are going to bring when it comes to oil and gas, we have already started embarking on different avenues and different ways on which we can have waste management. We all know that there are quite a number, there's going to be a lot of waste that is going to be from the activities in the oil and gas sector. And HIMA Cement is very keen on making sure that we have waste management for all this waste that will be coming through. In particular, I would like to highlight that there are two particular wastes that we are really embarking on, and to see how to control or have waste management on these. The first one is on the oil well drill cuttings, and also the other is on the petroleum sludge. And I would like to give the confidence to everyone here that we have an able team, and we have a facility that has been set up specifically to make sure that we can have this waste management done. The second slide is basically around oil well cement, but I would like to begin by highlighting one of our innovations and one of our babies this year, and that is the Innovations Tech Lab. It's one of a kind. You will not find it anywhere in the country. And through this Innovation Tech Lab, we basically are focusing on 4 areas. And I'm very sure that as I go through these 4 areas, the construction contractors, I will get the attention of the construction contractors. So the very first one is on the tests of fresh concrete and hardened concrete. I know that at least in the construction sector, there is a lot of resources and finances that have been used to make these tests. Now, as Hima Cement, we've come up with a tech lab that can handle all the tests around fresh concrete and hardened concrete. I know that there are also other contractors that would like to get knowledge of the optimal mix designs. How can I make sure that I can optimize my strength in concrete, I can optimize my workability in concrete, and overall, I can optimize my durability. And these three areas are what we focus on when it comes to the fresh concrete and the hard concrete tests. Then the second one is the tests on the dry mortar mixers. And I know that there's also an urgent need when it comes to tests around tile adhesives and grout. And in the Hima Cement Tech Lab, we have this service for you where we can obviously test slip resistance and anything concerning the properties of a good tile adhesive and a good grout. Then thirdly is optimizing of mix designs. This one we can do either on ground where the project is, or you can come together and we formulate a mix design that can help you in terms of putting up a reliable structure. Of course, I'm very sure that when it comes to construction contractors and subcontractors that will be getting some of these projects, this is one service that you would need. Then fourth and lastly really would be around fuel tests. We also do fuel tests. We do tests on fuel that will be used for biomass. And these tests are around what we call the calorific value. So if you would like to know what this biomass is going to deliver in your company concerning the calorific value, and also how much moisture content is involved in this biomass. And then also, if at all you would like to concentrate a little bit on the chemical analysis around the biomass, we have these tests ongoing in our lab. And so I believe that even through this lab, we will be empowering our construction contractors to get from Tier 3 to Tier 2 with the knowledge that they need to come up with optimal mix designs. Of course, I cannot stop before I mention the oil well cement, which is also going to be the first of its kind in the central and east region of Africa. What we've been doing is we've been importing this oil well cement from the likes of Greece, from China, but Hima Cement has come up with a locally manufactured, or nationally, yesterday we were corrected, nationally manufactured oil well cement. And normally what this oil well cement that has in CO2 emissions is about 1,100 kilograms per ton. However, with this national oil well cement solution that we are providing, we have reduced the CO2 emissions from 1,100 kilograms to 450 kilograms. And the beauty about it is also that we have a financial saving. So for anyone who's going to be using this oil well cement, let me say in Tier 1, you will have a financial return. The saving is on more than 40% what you would have imported and landed the oil well cement in the Graben. Then the fourth bit, and this is also a product that we are very keen on as Hima Cement, is PowerMax. We have a wide range of products, over 9 products, but for this convention, I have come to basically mention the PowerMax. It is a high-strength cement that can be used for high-strength construction works, but what's very unique about it is that its CO2 emissions are lower than all the other products that are 42.5 strength. And then secondly, it has a pozzolanic component that can counter any cement sulfate attacks. And I'm very sure that for those who have used cement in concrete, you know that this is one of the issues that face concrete mixes. So with that pozzolanic component, it can actually counter that. And then it is also good in the pocket because it saves you 2% to 3% in terms of your cost when you use it. Then the fourth aspect is it has a low heat of hydration that eventually helps with prevention of concrete cracks. So that product right there is already being used by some of the major players in Tier 1, and it has already begun gaining a very good reputation in its usage, in its workability, in its durability. And we are very, very sure that at least for the Tier 2 and Tier 3 that will be looking for a cement that can help with heavy construction works, Powermax is going to be the solution. So, of course, I would like to end the presentation by saying that as Hima Cement, we are very determined and we are cognizant of the fact that we have to at least find a way of making sure that we work together with all the players through Tier 1 to Tier 3 and help them in value retention. And we obviously are also working around making sure that after we have worked together, we provide solutions in products and services to ensure that you have financial return, you have the capacity development, and we obviously bring in industrial expertise to help you develop from the tier you're in to the next tier. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Marvin. I think I'll have to come back to you because we probably listened enough about the innovative products, and I want to congratulate Hima Cement on all those innovations, which I think will play a big role in the industry, especially on the construction side. But I'm sure the audience will still want to hear more about Tufunira Muwa. Where do we really gain? I think I'll come back to you on that. But to kick off this conversation, which I think the audience has been very eager to listen to, around value retention for Tier 2 and 3 contractors. We have a very diverse panel. Some people are direct contractors in the industry. Other people are on the side of regulation, like the URA. And I think to get this context right, I want to kick off with people from the industry. So I'm going to pose one question to two people here, and I want them to respond to it in their own different ways. I'll start with Jeff, but it's the same question that I'll put to Elson. So most of yesterday was about the licensees and Tier 1 contractors talking. Now, when we talk about value retention, in the context that I described it, profitability, financial sustainability, technical capability, managing risks, and so on and so forth, I want Jeff and Elson to share with us their thoughts on what they think the licensees, Total, CNOC, and other licensees, and UNOC and others, and the Tier 1 contractors, what should they do for you? So this is a call. It's an open space for you to call Tier 1 and licensees. What do they need to do for you at Tier 2 and 3 to be able to, one, create value? Because we can't talk about retaining something we haven't created. But very important, also retaining that value in the long term. Jeff, you come with a wealth of experience from the exploration sector, or the exploration phase. You are probably very well aware of the risks that, and the different corners you had to go past to now win contracts in the next phase. I think your fingers have been burnt at some point. I don't know to what extent. I think you're very well placed to tee up this conversation and share your experience.
Abu.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that question. My fingers have grown again for information. Let me take off the mask. My fingers have grown again. So I'm still waiting for the nails to grow. From my experience, I think first there's need for transparency in these relationships between the Tier 1 and the contractors. And by transparency, I refer to looking at this as a relationship-based, not as opposed to transactional-based relationship or engagement. So if you look at, or if you treat each other on a relationship basis, then it's very likely you'll work together. And in the process, that will enhance us to retain value. The other aspect, of course, which is important is supplier development. A number of suppliers need to be encouraged in various ways. And already, as I know from the previous round of activities, the Tier 1s spent some good time doing the development of suppliers. We hope that, the licensees, we hope the Tier 1 contractors will follow the same and enable 2 and 3 also to stand up. Supplier developers in different forms. You're looking at EHS, you're looking at aspects like business structuring, things like account management and ABCD. We also think having reasonable contractual tenures is very important, because giving someone a contract for 1 week or a month or 2 weeks may not, and yet you're asking for so much in return in terms of standards and other aspects, sometimes doesn't augur well. So there's no value retained. More or less, you're just hoping that person will fulfill their contractual obligations on ground, or being used to do that, as opposed to enabling you grow your business or retain value. Of course, there are other things the Tier 1 or licensee have to help us with, or to pass on to the rest of the tiers, minimizing some of the risk burden these other parties have, which comes from payments, which is financial. Sometimes people are taking so long to pay, or have taken long to pay, or a very unpredictable payment cycle. So if that is also put in place or taken care of, I think value retention will be greater. Of course, the last things which may not be out of the hands of the licensee and the Tier 1s is a conducive tax environment. But I believe we have someone here who will talk about that in detail as we engage. Training and skilling is another one for that level of contractors. So in a nutshell, those are the few aspects I can pick up based on my past experience and what I see going forward. I hope I've responded appropriately.
Thank you very much, Jeff. A round of applause for Jeff. I think Jeff has touched a number of subjects. I hope we have a repertoire for the conference, because I see us generating a report from this particular session and sending it to the licensees and the Tier 1 contractors. These are very, very specific insights and recommendations. Of course, the last one about tax, I think you've reported to the police itself, since we have someone from the URA. But we're going to come back to her. Elson, what are your thoughts on the same subject?
It is only fair to say that Jeff has really answered the question very exhaustively. However, I'll just point out that the licensee and the Tier 1 contractors, of course, have to realize, and I'm sure they do realize, and Matthew will confirm, that we are in this, or they are in this together with their subcontractors. The reason why licensees need subcontractors to have a certain amount of capacity is because you are dealing with a highly flammable substance. You may ignore the person who is in charge of guarding, and then you may end up burning the facilities. I mean, you're building a pipeline. You have to understand that any problem along that route can have a serious effect on our environment, and such an effect, even before you start building, you already have people who now have even changed their names to Stop ECOP. There's someone I've seen on social media called Stop ECOP. that is their name. They don't live here, they don't work here. When they wake up, when they sleep, their dream is to stop ECOP. So such a person is looking for you to fail. So we have to be in this together. So it's important, therefore, for the licensee and the Tier 1 contractors to understand the value of those who they are working with. Of course, it's also education and training is very important in building capacity. Even those who are Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, Tier 5, I don't know how many tiers we have, need to understand that all of you are working together to deliver a product and to conclude a project. This project has standards, it has contractual timelines, it has regulatory requirements. So an understanding of the task. Of course, supply development and training has been said. Capacity building has been said. Lobbying. I think there's a lot of, I wouldn't call it, well, we can call it lobbying, a lot of negotiation between the licensees, for example, and the government. Because at the end of the day, this oil belongs to the people of the Republic of Uganda. It is their resource 100%, and their government is the one that is managing it on their behalf. And the discussions and the lobbying should really cascade all the way down. It makes no point having a tax exemption for Total and then a tax on McDermott. Even at that level, before you come down. If you are giving a customs relief to someone to bring in pipes for a pipeline, and you've given that to Total, and then Total has subcontracted someone else to do it, if that person doesn't have the exemption, then you are making a distinction without a difference, and distinctions without differences shouldn't be made. So yes, lobbying should be done together. Training and education should be done together, but also the Tier 2 and Tier 3 contractors need to have a proper understanding of the global, by global I mean the project, of the project deliverables that the licensees have to cope with, and the Tier 1 contractors. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you say distinction without difference?
Yes, difference, which is the same. The difference is the same.
That is too much English, eh?
It means the difference is the same.
Thank you, Elson. Elson touched a subject. I don't know whether he saw the Executive Director of the Petroleum Authority entering, or whether it was in his notes before. But I'm going to use this opportunity to actually present Mr. Rubondo. Just the audience will allow me to play back something very small. This conversation is about value retention for Tier 2 and 3 contractors. And the worry we have, and why we're discussing this, is that these are subcontractors of subcontractors of subcontractors. Now, the fear is that by the time it reaches Tier 3, the value could have been taken out, whether in the negotiation or in the way works are scoped. And so we're trying to have a conversation about value retention. And Jeff just shared some very interesting insights on what could be done. One of the things he talked about, which is of a big issue, which I want to raise to you, he talked about contract tenures. Now, we know that contracts, especially the high-value ones, come to you for review or approval. And one of the things he raised is that the Tier 2 and Tier 3 subcontractors need to have contracts of reasonable tenures for them to begin to develop their capacity, to put in place the human resource. If they are going to negotiate loans from banks, they have better leverage because the contracts are fairly long. We don't know how you are managing that from a regulatory perspective, but it's also a very clear message to the licensees in the room and the tier 1 subcontractors. He also touched a very important one about payment cycles. You know, sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's 60 days, but you know 60 days become 90, depending on when you invoiced and when you received the purchase order and so on and so forth. The story becomes longer. So that's also a very clear message. And again, I thought that would be of interest to you. And the final one on supply development. But Elson touched a very important subject towards the end. And to me, I think that was more a message to the tier 2 and 3 subcontractors themselves to recognize the international nature of the industry in which they play and try and work towards the standards. But let me go to the last point that Jeff touched, and I'm going to move to Maggie. So Jeff, in his presentation, said for tier 2 and 3 contractors to retain value, or at least to start to create value, they also need to have a favorable tax regime or favorable tax treatment. And that was before Elson went in to talk about distinctions without differences and so on. But he was talking about the tax exemptions that pertain to, or at least the tax treatment for the licensees and tier 1 subcontractors. We have Ms. Margaret Obo in the room. I think we can have a conversation about, one, let her clarify to the audience the tax exemptions that will work across the 3 tiers or 4 tiers. I'm introducing a 4th one and making now the licenses the 1st tier because they have a tax treatment for customs clearance and so on. So how will it work for the licensee, the tier 1 and the tier 2 and 3 contractors? Can you give that clarification to the audience, please? And after that, I have a more difficult question for you.
Thank you so much. The licensees and level 1 contractors have been here in the upstream for such a long time. And when you look at also the midstream law, that is the ECOP, the East African Crude Pipeline Act of 2021, the licensee, level 1 and level 2 contractors have also been granted exemption. I think that is Schedule 2 of the Act. So in essence, for them, they have clear exemptions. The midstream level licensee, level 1 and level 2 contractors. Now the issue comes to level 3 contractors and level 2 contractors in the upstream. So probably that's where the issue is, because they don't have specific exemptions when you open the laws. However, it could be because of probably not knowing that they could utilize some of the customs procedure code, for example, for customs. We have one where the contractors are 3rd level contractors, both in the upstream and midstream, and 2nd level contractors in 2nd and 1st level contractors in the upstream. They can utilize, for custom purpose, they can utilize temporary custom procedure code, which grants them exemption at import duty. So I've been wondering why companies have not been taking up this option. Because unlike that, that's also the Custom Act also grants exemption on plant and machinery, but the universal exemption for those contractors that are not licensed would be the temporary machinery, where you don't pay any import duties. What you need is just to execute a guarantee. You get an insurance company. You execute a guarantee fee that is equivalent to the tax that you should have been assessed or paid at that point. And then the bond has a period of 3 years. It is renewable in case you import in plant and machinery, which is supposed probably to be used for 7 years or whatever is the period of the project. So meaning that every after 3 years, you can renew the bond. And then the catch is those plant and machinery are supposed to be re-exported. So custom officials are going to ensure that at the end of the project life, you re-export. Else, if these are not re-exported, then you pay the applicable taxes. Now that is for custom. When it comes to domestic, the internal taxes, we also have exemption in respect to withholding tax, the 6% withholding tax. But like what you saw in today's monitor, the people who have today's monitor, page 9, you have seen that with effect from 1st July 2022 this year, there's now a checklist that for you to be able to benefit from the 6% withholding tax, you must be able to comply with that list that has been put up. When it comes to companies in the midstream, because there's some place where we see 3 years, a company should have been operating for 3 years, but we've also appreciated that for some, we give some special treatment to companies, say contractors, because we know that we cannot really wait for 6 years, for 3 years to grant them 6% withholding tax. So on a case by case, we actually grant both contractor 1, contractor 2, even contractor 3, depending on how when we request for contracts and then you ably submit, we've been actually granting. You've told me to highlight on licenses, level 1, level 2, level 3, but where the law is clear.
Let me ask specifically about deemed VAT.
Okay.
Whether there's consideration to extend it to tier 2 and 3.
Okay,
the good thing,
yes,
the
the
Petroleum Authority is also here, so you can both make a quick decree here.
Okay, deemed VAT for level 1 contractors in the upstream is regulated by the VAT Act. So that one, we don't have an issue. When it comes to level 2 contractors in the midstream, so we have deemed VAT provision for licensee level 1 and level 2 contractors. It doesn't extend to level 3 contractors. However, still how we can, the companies can get value from the contracts is that although they don't have deemed VAT, we also have a refund regime that if you are compliant with the IFRIS, you know the IFRIS, the Gazette of 550, was it 595? Yes, of 2020. So if you purchase from suppliers that are on IFRIS and for any tax period, you have an amount claimable above 5 million, you can request for a refund and we shall grant you that refund. So, yeah, even if there is not deemed for third level contractors, we can actually refund the money. What we need to do is that you must be able to comply with the IFRIS provision, meaning that you're supposed to purchase from IFRIS registered taxpayers. We wouldn't also want to become a cost at the end of that day, because now the law is clear that for suppliers that are not registered for IFRIS, if a contractor, even if it is level 1, level 2, level 3 contractors, and you have purchased, it means that you will not be entitled to input VAT for level 3, and even that cost will not be granted at the end of that day. So, although there might be an issue of cash flow in respect to the third level contractors, but the end of it is that we can still refund whenever you hit 5 million and above in any tax period, please just lodge in a return and we shall refund the money.
Thank you very much, Maggie. I think, put your hands together for Maggie. This is free consultancy. Eh? This is free consultancy. I want to move to, maybe I think we need to have a conversation in the chamber to organize a separate session on tax, because the number of issues and advice we require is enormous. So I think it's one of the actions we are going to take. I'm sure the rapporteur is noting that we will have a session for suppliers and just focus on tax and see what value we can save and manage the tax risk. I want to ask Matthew, and this is a question I'm also going to put to the other panelists as we start to wind down the session. I said I don't want to run into Jimmy's session. I know what trouble he'll give me if we do. But Matthew, you are the only one representing a licensee here. Now, licensees really have the control on the value that goes down the food chain, as it were. You're the ones who define the contract frameworks, you define the scopes of work, you really dictate the terms under which Tier 2 and 3 companies eventually will work. So we would like to know what CNOC and other licensees are doing to make sure that Tier 2 and 3 contractors get value from the contracts and participation in the industry. But more importantly, what are you doing in terms of long-term value retention for all the players in the value chain?
Thank you so much, Abdul. As CNOC and the joint venture partners, there are two ways we are handling this. One, directly. There are things that we are doing directly as JV partners to ensure that value retention at the level of Tier 2 and Tier 3 is achieved. And there are also things that we are requiring our Tier 1 contractors to do to ensure the same. Allow me to start with what we are requiring our...
Just before you go on, Matthew, let me interrupt you. Let me ask the audience to prepare your questions and comments. After Matthew has spoken, I'll open the floor to the audience to ask you questions. I'm sure you have a few questions and comments that you'd want. We'll have about 5 or 10 minutes to give to the audience. Sorry, Matthew, continue.
Thank you. Yes, one of the things that we are requiring our Tier 1 contractors to do is to ensure that they have payment milestones or payment terms that feature more frequent payment milestones, shorter durations where possible, upfront or advance payments to help Tier 2 and Tier 3 contractors with purchases of materials. That's one of the interventions we are requiring our Tier 1 contractors to do. Secondly, we are encouraging what we call the labor-based approaches to some of the less complex activities. You talked about an activity like fencing. For example, if we have two proposals where one bidder is proposing to bring in a machine to do work that would otherwise be done by like 100 laborers, we will be inclined to support the bidder that has a system or is using labor-based approach, especially when the work is less complex. So that is also one of the other things we require. How we are approaching this to ensure that there is value retention at that level and value created on ground. We are also requiring our Tier 1 contractors to unbundle. We have, as operators or as IOCs, have unbundled already, but some of these big packages are still so big. So we require our Tier 1 contractors to unbundle their packages further to ensure they put aside scopes that can be done at Tier 2 and 3, like civil works and others, to ensure that there is value retention and there are more Tier 2 or 3 contractors able to participate. Yeah, we are also encouraging joint ventures at that Tier 2 and 3, and not just joint ventures with international companies, which are happening and very well, but we're also encouraging joint ventures between local companies themselves, especially where they add value and create a niche with each other. Yeah, and on the side, that is just a snapshot of what we are encouraging or requiring our Tier 1 contractors to do. But as CNOC and the other joint venture partners, we are directly involved in ensuring that there is value retention through several capacity development and training programs. One of the training programs we are having is the Train the Trainer program, which we are doing, and we are ensuring that universities and higher institutions of learning like UPIC and vocational training institutions, we are training their teachers who are able to teach other and certify other students to create a critical mass of trained personnel that can be employed by these Tier 2 and 3 contractors, and afterwards be able to be used by our Tier 1 and ourselves. So that is one of the trainings we are doing, the Train the Trainer program that is going on. There is also the welder training and certification that is ensuring that we are producing internationally certified welders to work in future on the pipeline, but also in the meantime be employed by these Tier 2 and Tier 3 contractors. This also happens with the heavy goods vehicle drivers training and ECITB training. Now, there is also an effort by CNOC and the joint venture partners to ensure that there is enterprise development and training. Last year alone, CNOC trained 150 SMEs in several aspects of enterprise development, and we are also working very closely with the Stanbic Bank Business Incubator and supporting it to ensure that these Tier 1 and Tier 2 levels are taken care of in regards to supplier development. We are also having community development programs. This year we are going to have a community development program that is looking at agriculture. We want to see how to help those agricultural enterprises to be able to meet the standards, to be able to meet the requirements. And this is also in an effort alongside the agricultural development program that the IOCs have been doing since 2018. And lastly but not least, we also hold quarterly supply development engagements. This is also a legal requirement, also a statutory requirement, that where we tell these Tier 1 and Tier 2 and Tier 3 contractors about the opportunities available in the sector at all levels. So these are some of the interventions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I'm glad eventually you mentioned what you are doing as CNOC, as a licensee. The reason I'm saying I'm glad, you started by mentioning what you've asked the Tier 1 contractors to do. And then eventually you said what you're doing. The reason I said I'm glad is because someone whispered in the corridor somewhere that, you see the problem, most of the focus and the policy focus and streamlining is on the licensees. But the licensees do nothing. Of course, that's a sweeping statement. The licensees also do some work. At least they issue the major contracts. But there's a whole conversation about at a policy level, and I want to put this to Jeff and Elson as we conclude, think about the question as I open up the audience. In concluding, whilst we have the policymakers here, we have the bankers here, and several other people, I'll ask you to make some concluding remarks on, from a policy perspective, what you think could really help the Tier 2 and Tier 3 contractors to create value and sustain it. And I think if Maggie can also chip in as we close, that would be very good. Because the early regulations really focused, truthfully, on the licensees and how they would work. As it turned out, the licensees have issued all the contracts and the real work on the ground to Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 subcontractors. And therefore, we need to think about where the gaps in our policies or regulations, as it were. And it would be good for the people to listen, including from financing. I've seen some bankers here. Now, I want to open this to the audience. If anybody has a question or comment, I don't know how we'll do it, but we have microphones that are roving. I'll pick you in no particular order. The gentleman with the microphone, please. If you can direct your question to any of the panelists, it would help. If you can't, ask it in a generic way. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Start by introducing yourself, who you are, and where you work, and then you can ask your question or make your comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Abdul. Thank you, everyone. This is a fantastic session. My name is Ferdinand, and I am a tax director. I am the tax director at Libra Advocates and Consultants. So obviously my questions are going to be targeted at Margaret, and obviously I will set a challenge for everyone else in this room. Margaret, thank you very much for differentiating between the fact that there are exemptions that are specific to the oil and gas sector from a taxation point of view, but then there are also general exemptions that are applicable to you as a taxpayer. I think it's important that we need to understand that just because exemptions are not specifically for the oil and gas sector, it doesn't mean that you as a taxpayer cannot take advantage of those general exemptions. Be that as it may, Margaret, we would still like to bring to your attention that one of the best ways of retaining value for Tier 3 and 4 contractors is if VAT deeming is extended further down that value chain. Because what's happening is there's this gap right now where the contractors are paying the subcontractors late. And as a result of that late payment, there is a VAT liability that has a 2% interest compounded per month on late payment. And the best solution, I believe, for that is to extend VAT deeming further down the value chain. My second question to Margaret will be, back in the day when oil and gas started, the URA put up a desk which was specific to the oil and gas sector and the industry sector for oil and gas, where questions and issues regarding exemptions, regarding compliance, regarding certain procedures were answered. Obviously, as time went on and the oil and gas industry went down, that desk and that office sort of dissipated a little bit. My question is there hope for that desk to come back? Because clearly you can see from the questions in this room, there is a need for URA to engage in this industry consistently. And finally, my challenge is to everyone else in this room. If we are going to be trying to lobby for legislation change, if we are going to be trying to ask the URA to give us some specific attention and advice, can we all please make a collective and concerted effort to make sure that tax compliance for this industry sector is second to none? Because that is the only way, I believe, that the URA and the government will be able to listen to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very well put, and I think very well heard by Margaret. I'll go to this gentleman. Please, can I limit the questions or comments to one in the interest of time?
Thank you very much. My name is Humphrey Asimwe from Multilines International. I had two. I'll just take very, very short time. It's about still on the taxation issue. Yes, it's true that when importing items, the East African Customs Management Act allows for zero import duty for machinery, whether it is for the oil and gas industry or for other industries. And then when it goes to the other taxes, that is VAT and withholding tax at importation, you use the Customs Procedure Code 475. But still, that only applies for the licensees. When it comes to tier 2, tier 3, okay, you are at pains to prove that whatever you're bringing in is for the oil and gas industry. Yet we understand the reason as to why that was done. I would refer you back to the time when we're building Karuma Dam. And Karuma Dam, a particular CPC was opened by URA for anything and anyone at whatever level was importing anything for Karuma. The truth of the matter is at that time, even if you're importing a chair and you would prove that it was to be used on the Karuma Dam project, it would go exempt because of that particular code. And there were reasons for that. So I think URA needs to be clear on some of these and be able to define properly so that it's not just the IOCs, but the rest, tier 2, tier 3, that are involved in this also do benefit. The other issue is about the Abdul, if you just...
Humphrey,
okay, thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to ask that, I think the issues around tax have been well put, and Margaret has heard. We'll organize a conference, I said, or a workshop on tax, but I don't want to turn this particular session into a crash course on tax. So if you have a question on tax, kindly defer it. So there's a lady there. Please take the microphone. I think it's Betty from the Petroleum Authority. That won't be about tax, certainly.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Abdul, and thank you to all the panelists. Mine is to the gentleman from Hima Cement. First of all, to congratulate you upon the new products, including the oil well cement. And my question is just to understand, have we acquired all the necessary certification to have this go out there? I know you talked about research, but it would be good to know whether it's really certified. But also in terms of production, what's the production capacity of this? And why I'm asking, would want to know what the capacity is vis-a-vis what the wells need. Then maybe lastly, we'll need to have an engagement to see how we can sell this out to the contractors, given that it's going to be needed in larger quantities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Betty. I'll ask the person with the microphone to now move to this side. Oh, you have a question, Ellie? I don't have an option on that. Please take the microphone to Ellie. And as you know, Ellie doesn't speak a lot, so it will be a short question or comment.
Thank you. It's just for you to give me an exemption to say something about tax. On the 4th of April, which is 9 days ago, the Chamber wrote a letter to the Executive Director of Petroleum Authority of Uganda, who is sitting just next to me, about the two issues that have been raised. The equipment that is imported by the third, second tier and downwards, and also the VAT exemption, and the challenge that it has been able to handle very well. The thing is that the industry, as it stands, cannot really run. All these people, seated members of the chamber, cannot supply their services at all with the cash flow challenges, and therefore it means there's going to be absolute frustration for everybody. So while this is not going to be a seminar on that, the fact that we have everybody in the room who matters, and the fact that we have not yet received a letter from the PAO answer, because he's probably working on it.
We can get a verbal answer here.
Yeah, no, I don't want to put him on the spot.
I'm the one in charge. No, I'm joking.
Yeah. But the banks are having a challenge. The insurance companies are having a challenge on issuing the bond. The people who win the contracts cannot. I know, for example, one of the people in the audience now is supposed to look for $4 million to pay for this VAT. Where will you find that on top of looking for the money to buy and bring the equipment? And yet, if it was Total, it would not have to look for $4 million. But for you and me, you have to look for $4 million. Where would you, in this, do you think that Stanbic MD will give me $4 million if I walk in her office tomorrow?
She will.
It's not possible.
And I've spoken on your behalf, won't you? No, thank you very much, Ellie. I think there's a big issue there around tax. I just want to take 2 more questions, then I'll decide what to do next. I was told when you have the microphone, you call the shots. But I didn't pick anyone from my left. That doesn't look to... Oh, there's a gentleman here, please. I take the microphone to him. And Mr. Rubondo, if you'd want to make a comment or verbally acknowledge receipt of the Chamber's letter, you'll be free, but you are not on the spot.
I think my name is Maurice from Minet Insurance. You had ably the issue of risk. I think tax is a big issue, much as we will have to talk about it probably later. Insurance has 18% VAT. There's a tax exemption for the main, the Total, Sinok, but Tier 2, Tier 3, you will have to pay the 18%. Insurance is cash before cover can commence, so even issues of credit are going to be a challenge. The premium has to be paid before cover commences. That's the insurance law as it is in this country. So I think we need to synchronize all these things, because then we'll start having gaps and bottlenecks which need to be managed before we can say that things are smooth and everybody is now able to perform in terms of these contractual requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the Democrat or dictator in me is telling me that there's a lot of interest in this subject. So I'm going to pivot towards concluding this session by requesting Mr. Rubondo to make a comment if he wants. I've not dictated to him, but while he does, I'll still make, can someone take the microphone to Mr. Rubondo? This is my only chance to instruct the regulator. For the last 14 years, I've taken instructions from him. So I have a chance to instruct him now. Welcome, Mr. Rubondo. Is it on? Okay.
Yes, it is on. Thank you very much, moderator. I trust that you are using your single opportunity to instruct the regulator wisely and sustainably. In the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, we have a process where letters are, the receipt of letters is acknowledged within 30 minutes of their arrival. So I am sure the people who sent the letter received an acknowledgement of receipt, so they know that this letter is sitting in the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. We are, first of all, very happy that we have such a working relationship, that we share our challenges kind of openly and freely. And Petroleum Authority of Uganda will be extremely excited to, we'll be very happy to address or solve a challenge that is in between our Ugandan companies benefiting or participating in the oil and gas sector. I think the desire of the authority in the Ugandan companies participating and benefiting from the sector is very well known. As you are aware, the issue at hand is about taxation, and there is an authority in this country that actually deals with taxation. So as soon as we got the letter, that authority is also a very strong, is in partnership with the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. We actually have an MOU with the Uganda Revenue Authority. So we've shared it with them. They have looked at the issue, and the two institutions are considering what is at play. As you are aware, the business that the second and third tier contractors do is not restricted to oil and gas. And so the tax authority is also interested in making sure that in taking a decision on that matter, they do not open any leakages to other aspects that are not oil and gas. We think that there are opportunities for providing either ring fencing or firewalls between the intended objective, and if that is considered well and successfully, the letter should be responded to without any problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for Mr. Rubondo, at least for acknowledging receipt of the letter to the entire audience. I think we've run out of time. Our last comments will come from Maggie because majority of the questions have been focused on tax. But just before Maggie makes a comment, I just want to give assurance to the audience. We've had opportunity as Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum to work with the Petroleum Authority. We actually have a process. We're in the process of signing an MOU for partnership and engaging on these matters. So what Mr. Rubondo is saying is exactly true. But my company, True North, has also been a beneficiary of the relationship between URA and the Petroleum Authority. We registered a joint venture company, and we couldn't get past the URA requirements to register on with the Petroleum Authority. Just one email to clarify to URA were given all the permissions required. We got the VAT registration, we got the TIN, because there are hurdles that you need to go through. So there are specific provisions or exceptions being made for players in the oil and gas industry because the Petroleum Authority has discussed them with the URA. So I have a lot of faith that this conversation will happen. Over to you, Maggie, before we close. Oh, there was a question for, maybe Marvin can respond to the question from Betty, and then I'll go to Maggie.
All right. Thank you, Betty. They're back. Thank you. All right. Thank you for your question. Just to basically give you the satisfaction.
Try and keep the response brief, Marvin.
Yes.
I'm under pressure for time.
Okay. Hima Cement has a particular production plant called the Namave Blending Station that is basically used for producing specialized products. We are using it currently to produce Minesem that is used in the mining industry. And this same production plant is going to be used to produce the oil well cement that I've talked about. We have a production capacity of over 300,000 tons annually. And currently, the demand we have, at least from one of the biggest subcontractors, is about 3,500 tons for the first 6 months. So you can clearly see that we have the capacity to provide that oil well cement. The certification will be out. We are at the tail end, so it will be out in the next 3 months. I hope I've answered your question.
Would that be local or international certification?
Local.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maggie, over to you.
Thank you so much, Abdul. Probably through this forum, I'm requesting that we can have another session organized by the Uganda Chamber of Mines on issues of taxation, because right now we are discussing issues of adding value, but I'm seeing that there is actually a high risk of eroding the value through non-tax compliance. I'm afraid. So for me, I would want to protect the contract through erosion. And if I'm to go through what I had actually planned, I think we would have to sleep here. But just to answer that question.
Just the workshop will happen. That's for
sure.
certain. Everybody who matters in the Uganda Chamber of Mines and Petroleum is here.
Yeah, sure.
And we've heard, so that will certainly happen. Okay. If I was in the audience, I would clap for the chamber for that.
Okay, just to answer the questions briefly, retention of value for deeming for third, fourth, probably fifth, like as Mr. Rubonda has said, this is a policy issue that is being actually analyzed. It is being taken up. The desk for oil and gas, yeah, with effect from August 2020, with effect from August 2019, we have now a division, a petroleum division, where I sit, which handles upstream issues, the upstream oil and gas sector issues, the midstream, and then the mining. So on third floor, instead of going to that desk which was removed, you can just come to us and we shall handle any issues. Yeah. Importance of items, machinery, and okay, yes, sure. The East African Community Castle Management Act, the fifth schedule recognizes the licensee, which is an issue. Yes, it has been scoped, and this is the reason why that general provision in respect to that fifth schedule recognizes the licensee. But when it comes to other players, they will be VAT, although it will be deferred. Then the withholding tax only if you are on the exemption list. Yeah. So also that one is being looked at because we have recognized that if contractors, the third, the fourth, are actually exclusive to the oil and gas sector, yeah, we could probably look through the policy issues and try to also see that they also benefit. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Hand clap for Maggie, especially for offering to come here and present when we organize the workshop on tax. This is a very interesting conversation, but I've run out of time. As I told you initially, the next session is being run by Jimmy, and we still have an appraisal that never happened while we're still working together, so I don't want it to be recalled. But just to conclude the session, allow me just to share some very quick takeaways and a point which I know that was really itching Jeff to share around at a policy level. And this is, I think, he would have been looking at Mr. Rubondo while making this point. So I'll do it for him. So there's a conversation about how mutually beneficial are the contracts when they are drafted or shared. So there's a question mark whether there's a line of sight at a policy level to check whether this contract being issued to a tier 2 or 3 company is really mutually beneficial, or it won't just be participation for the tier 2 or 3 company, but in the long term, they can never really create value. Now, that means looking at all the aspects that I summarized that they talked about, the payment terms, the duration of the contract. Very importantly, the scope of the work itself, whether it allows the tier 2 or 3 licensee to create the capacity required in a sustainable way. But there's been some very good insights. I think the point that Elson raised about distinctions without differences was really about policy. And that is what drifted into the detailed conversation about deemed VAT and the entire tax regime for the industry. And on a pleasant note, to say to the audience that some of the sticky issues that were raised here had already been raised by the chamber through to the Petroleum Authority, and the Petroleum Authority had already started a discussion with the Uganda Revenue Authority. I have a reason to feel that we're well covered, but this conversation has to continue. So hopefully you'll all attend the workshop on tax. Thank you very much. Put a round of applause to all our panelists. Thank you very much. Some of you, I didn't come back to you, but it's been a great pleasure. I'll not ask the audience to put their hands together for the moderator. Thank you.